The longer we've been there, the more that's been important to us to bring in those new people. And we have a commissioning program. We've commissioned a number of artists, and kind of the criteria is that we approach an artist whose work we think is really interesting, but quite different from ours. But that we feel some kind of sympathy for, but that would also be challenging for us.
Welcome, friends. I'm Kristen Merding, and this is Torches. Today we have the prolific Ellen Maddow and Paul Zimet. Ellen and Paul are both award-winning multi-hyphenate artists who founded the Talking Band over 50 years ago and have been working in New York City since. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Welcome, Ellen and Paul.
Thank you.
Hi, Marty.
Yay.
Kristen.
So you guys are right at the beginning of downtown performance. Can you talk about how you came to be in this community?
My road into it was not direct. First of all, I guess, I had loved theater since I was a kid. My mom used to take me to shows. I went to Columbia College before they had a theater department there, and the Columbia players used to do shows. But I went to Harvard Medical School for a year. I spent most of that year directing shows over at Harvard College. I realized it wasn't for me, so I came back to New York thinking I would be a director, and I directed a show at Judson Poets Theater at Judson Church, and was looking around, was studying with different people, studying Shakespeare, doing that, and then a friend, Marcia Jean Kurtz, who was a friend from high school, said, I'm working with this company. You might be interested in doing workshops, and it was the Open Theater. And she said, would you like to come? And I came, and I just looked at it, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I joined a workshop with the Open Theater that Lee Worley was running, and after a while, Joe was starting a new project, which was The Serpent, and he invited me and Tina Shepard, who is also a founding member of the Talking Band, into that work. And I spent the next 7 years with the Open Theater. That was really my school. Mm-hmm. We used to bring in all kinds of artists and non-artists, people like Susan Sontag and Joseph Campbell, singers, Jan DeCatani, and dancers, Carla Maxwell, and people to teach us stuff, Sufi people and voice people, Kristen Linkletter. And so it was really an education as well as an education how to create theater. That just hooked me on creating work as an ensemble, where you felt invested in the work, where you felt you weren't just an actor giving a part, but you had input. You were also called on to write, to generate material, and being really inspired by Joe's way of looking at the world and looking at theater as well. So.
Incredible. I got to work with him later, much later after he'd had a stroke, and I studied with him at NYU. I got to take some amazing classes, and he also was a deep influence on the work that I've made. Yeah. How about you, Ellen? How did it come about?
So I'm a little bit younger, and I went to Antioch College in Ohio, and I was really into theater, but again, my parents took me to the theater, and they were both in the arts. My father was a screenwriter, my mother was a dancer with Martha Graham, so there was a kind of legacy already. But I was just about ready to give up on theater. I was like a senior in college. I felt people were very self-involved, and it wasn't that interesting. And I thought there was this other kind of theater, maybe, where you could, have input into what it was about. And then there was this thing called the Great Lakes College Association thing where they would send you people to do stuff in New York. So they said, oh, there's this theater company that you might be interested in, and it turned out to be the Open Theater, and they had just, Joe had just made the company a lot smaller. So I was the intern, me and Julie Taymor, actually, which is strange when you think about it now, making the coffee and sweeping the floor and stuff like that. But you know, as soon as I started watching them, I was really, you know, it's like, this is what I want to do. This is amazing. You know, Joe is amazing. because the company had gotten much smaller and they were working on terminal, where there was a musician, somebody who had to keep time on the drum without speeding up, which is not so easy, I could do that because I studied a lot of piano before. Then I became indispensable, and then I got to go on tour, and then I got to be a member of the company in the last 3 years of it. That was the way in. And then when I can go on. When the company ended, a lot of it there had been a kind of thing of being very suspicious of spoken language because it was kind of leading you astray. But we got very interested in poetry, and partly because Paul, you had gone first to Naropa Institute, where Allen Ginsberg was, and all these poets who spoke their poetry. Amazing group of people. So we started getting interested in how could you speak in a way that was as visceral and interesting as the way the open theater had worked with movement and more nonverbal kinds of sound. And also we were really interested in music and the borderline between language and music. So that's how we started experimenting with the talking band, and we did a bunch of evenings of poetry and songs in our loft, where people were supposed to bring pillows and sit on the floor and drink wine, and we would do these programs. So that's how it got started. You have anything to add? I don't know. That was 1973, the first year that we called ourselves the Talking Band.
Yeah. Yeah, and that led to the first actual theater work that we did, which was the Kalevala, which was an adaptation of a Finnish epic poem. It's like the Iliad of Finland, and it was very spare, the performance of it, the way that it actually used to be performed by these ancient singers in Finland was to sit on a log and rock back and forth. Then one person would finish the line of the other person. And we sort of started from that. So it was very spare. And Elizabeth Swados wrote the music for that. And that was very informative to us and to Ellen's approach
really
to
influenced
music.
Both that and working with the Open Theater, where there were some amazing people like Dick Peasley and stuff working on music in both of those places. That's
so you didn't
inspired.
think of yourself as a composer originally. You grew into a composer.
Yes.
And for you grew into a writer as well as a director, right?
Right.
You both write, I know.
Right. Yeah. And we both were performers, with the Open Theater, and continued to be with the Talking Band.
Yeah, the first few pieces, we had like a group that was always the same group of people, and we made a piece for that group of people, and we all performed in it. Started out with 7 of us. And then eventually we started to spread out and use people that we hadn't worked with before, and that's continued.
Yeah, basically. And I think that broadening also happened when we felt that we sort of were getting this thing with the language and music relationship under our belts. Not that you ever get it totally under your belts, but then we start to really spread out, and the production became not as spare. We worked with wonderful designers, and ultimately with choreographers, and so that became very multi-layered. The work. Yeah.
How has your creation process evolved over time? That's one part of it, is bringing in not the same ensemble members, but different ensemble members on different projects. But you do have a lot of people who you work with project to project. Yeah.
The trick in kind of longevity in a company is both how you keep things fresh, but also how you build on what you've already done. So to find that balance of, people who have a certain shared language or certain shared skills, but also then bringing in people who have totally different approaches. And the longer we've been there, the more that's been important to us to bring in those new people. And we have a commissioning program. We've commissioned a number of artists, and kind of the criteria is that we approach an artist whose work we think is really interesting, but quite different from ours. But that we feel some kind of sympathy for, but that would also be challenging for us, and say, make anything you want with us,
Can you give some examples of artists that you've worked with that way?
Yeah, so we commissioned Taylor Mack, and this was actually came out of the first time we worked with Taylor was in
Lily's
Lily's Revenge,
Revenge,
which you
yeah.
did it here, and I directed the first part of that, and the Talking Band was in that. And after that, we commissioned him to write a work for the Talking Band, which was The Walk Across America from Mother Earth. And just like doing that, sort of opened up this whole new world, both the Lily's Revenge and this, because, it brought us into this whole world of burlesque, cabaret performers who had a very different style, very presentational, sort of, kind of directly to the audience.
And we still work with some of those people that we met in Lily's Revenge.
And we continue to work with those people, and people like Machine Dazzle, his designer, his extravagant, gorgeous costumes, that kind of thing, sort of also then became part of our work. And since then, we've done a number of commissions. We've commissioned Ralph Lee, the puppet maker, Center at Highwaymen, which we did a piece 2 years ago, the following evening.
It was gorgeous.
Thank you.
I loved
Yeah,
that.
it was
so
really
much. It was
interesting
so
working.
moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We worked with him on it for a really long time, partly because the pandemic was in the middle of it, and we started doing things on Zoom, which nobody had ever done. But we were so freaked out that they were a couple who also does theater together. Mm-hmm. They're about the same age as our children, but I always thought of them as, contemporaries. And so it was a really interesting exchange, I think a really strong relationship. And, basically they were interviewing us a lot, and it was like a fictional version of ourselves that the play was about, kind of. Some people believe all of it was true, but some of it was about them, really.
But it was also, in terms of learning for us, it was, first of all, their work was very movement-based, but in a very specific kind of way, kind of very simple and gestural, but it's actually quite complicated. We had to learn these.
We had to learn these
long sequences of movements that then were broken up in different ways and used with different texts, and it was.
It was a challenge, but it was really fun.
But more than that, their style of acting is very pared down, and they kept saying, it kept making us act less, just cut this down. And at first, it was very resistant. It's kind of like, because Michael Silverstone, who is one of the two artistic directors, would give a line reading, and I said, God, that's just totally flat, But then I did it, and I sort of really learned the value of how much of it was coming out with a kind of very, very simplified kind of performance style. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was really interesting.
We learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then we commissioned Anne Bogart to do a piece Existentialism that same year. And we had worked with, back in the 80s, on a play, No Plays, No Poetry, which we did at Ohio Theater.
That's the first show of yours I saw. Yeah. I loved that show so much.
It was really great. And that was 3 theater companies. It was actually Ultra
Banda, right?
And hers was called Via Theater at that time. That was Anne's, and then Talking Band. So it was a collaboration between those 3.
But we hadn't worked with her since the 80s, so we've been friends since then. So coming back to working with her, and her style could not be more different than from 600 Highwaymen, because she's just like this. Everything's really quick, and try this, try that. That's good. That's not. She has
they didn't belabor any.
Very quick mind. It's kind of like, oh, I know what we're going to do, and just you sort of jump in to it.
And it was totally devised, which is not how we usually work anymore. Mm-hmm. We generally write our plays beforehand, even though we have a lot of input from whoever we're collaborating with. Mm-hmm. Either us or somebody else writes the play more often than we devise it from scratch, which is what we used to do at the beginning too.
And you work really fast, right? You put something up every year that's completely new, that you don't do long-term development, right?
We're trying to now more.
Okay.
Yeah. For that, in our 50th anniversary season 2 years ago, we did 3 new productions, but the following evening was in the works for 4 years.
Okay.
And
Anne's we did really quick.
We did like in 2 months. And then
Shimmer and Herringbone
was also developed over a long period of time. And that was another. Now we've also commissioned Olivera Kajic, the costume designer, to be a lead artist in our last piece.
But in that one, in the Shimmer and Herringbone, it started during the pandemic. When it started during lockdown, she sent these boxes of pieces of costumes to people at their houses, wherever they were, because some people left the city, and there was about 7 people or something, right?
There were about 5
and then
cities.
and then they got these boxes of goodies, and then we tried to do these online workshops and try to come up with characters, and so that was the seed of the idea for that show. And then we built on that, and then we could see each other face to face again and be in the same room.
And it was so joyous.
It was so joyous, yeah.
How do you balance experimentation with craft?
Yeah, we were talking about that. I think it's connected. I think there's a kind of meticulousness that we always use because that is kind of the experiment. It's like you can't figure out whether it works until you get it really, really precisely like you imagine it. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, but I think also it is experimenting with the form. What form then will be the shape of that piece, and then trying to then, when we have it, work meticulously. So, I mean, Ellen, you've tried lots of different structures for pieces like the last piece, Triplicity. It was really mostly a series of monologues, but that they were interlinked by all these kind of internal repetitions.
And it's sort of a musical form that there's three lines of, there's it's the old way of doing music before there was really harmonic structure. There's like 3 almost melody lines, 1 in the middle and 2 that you could listen to any one of them and they would be complete, but then the way they go together. So I sort of had that as an idea of how to structure something.
Yeah, and then like in Panic, Euphoria, or Blackout, you had the other.
This idea of a story goes in a circle, that it starts at a point and ends back up at that point, and that sometimes people, like I think they use the example of Abraham and Isaac story, like why would God say you should kill your son? But if you already knew that he was going to change his mind by the end, and that there was a trial, that the story has a circle, goes back to the beginning, and that there's a bunch of stories in history that are, in the history of stories that are like that. So I tried to do, and there's a turning point, and it goes back after the turning point. So
which is really different than a traditional dramatic structure, which moves in a line in some way, or moves like
so
that.
I messed with that, to see what would happen.
Does your identity inform the work that you all make? It definitely did in the 600 Highwaymen collaboration, but does it usually inform the work that you make, do you think?
I mean, I think that I always make pieces that are about whatever I'm thinking about, or how I would like to be if I could be perfect. Or, there's always this friend of ours says all my plays are about a default utopia, which is usually like a random group of people that becomes a family with each other, and it seems to be something that I strive towards in sort of community, that. And also, I think we're both very influenced by, we like to read, we read a lot, and so whatever we're reading has a big influence on what we make, in addition to whatever's going on in the world. And
I think I'm a curious person. I'm curious about learning things. A lot of that is through books, but it's also about seeing what else is happening in the world or other people's work. In terms of personality, I try to find a kind of balance in my life. Theater is like my main passion. I'm also very involved with my family. We have kids and grandkids, and I've been practicing Aikido for more than 15 years. I teach Aikido. Ellen and I have been doing mediation as in the court system for the just as volunteers for the last 12, 13 years. All those things become part of my life and my work, and I think it's also I don't know. I want the work to be really surprising and fresh. Have people see things in a new way, but not do. I don't think we're outrageous in the sense of although, some of the stuff we did with Taylor might be considered outrageous, or some pieces, I'm not so interested in doing things for shock value or for to grab attention, but and I guess it's a kind of moderation,
I think my characters are getting older as I get older, definitely.
I love, was it Shimmer and Herringbone is the one with all the people in the dance class together?
Oh no, that's Lemon Girls. Yeah,
Lemon
that was
Girls.
the one before that. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
I just love that community of people and the way that they informed each other and fed off each other.
And that was really based on this dance class that I do take, I still take it, and how people seem like these kind of old people, and then you start talking to them and find out they're like, oh, especially since it's our neighborhood down there, artists and teachers and people with like really interesting imaginations, even though they're not dancers. And that was kind of the impulse behind it, like how you find out about people the more you know them. And
I think that's been a sort of a through line in our work. I think we had it in our mission statement at one point, it's to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. And I think both our work, we're really interested in kind of what's that particular thing revealed in a person that you might not first, understand, or just like in Triplicity, our latest work, which is about three ordinary New Yorkers. At first, they just seem like the initial character keeps repeating, there's nothing to say, my life is so routine. But as you go on, you realize it's not. And part of what lifts it up is how their lives are lifted both by the language and the music that sort of supports them and heightens the kind of
life that they get to live.
The life
out of the quotidian into the extraordinary.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You talked a little bit about impact of work and thinking about the culture that we're in. It's obviously a really tempestuous time in the United States right now. What do you think about the role of your work, or that artists should take in this time when we're in so much turmoil as a country?
Yeah.
And the field is in turmoil too, but
Right.
more the country. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I think that's such a tricky question. I don't think there's necessarily one answer for all artists, and also particularly what country you're. I think Joe Chaikin had this sense of that all work is political that you do, either by default or by intention. So if what your work is doing is just presenting what's the most shallow, unexamined part of our lives, without suggesting any imagination for alternatives, that is by default a political thing.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a responsibility to present some kind of alternate understanding than what is more and more, fed to you by. I mean, we thought it was bad in the 50s, but it's like really bad now. Just the lives that are repeated over and over again. As truths. I think there's kind of a responsibility, to present something different.
Also, go ahead.
No, and at the same time be entertaining. As Bret always said, you have to educate and be entertaining. You can't be one or the other.
Things have been on such a roller coaster for the last number of years that in a way we've talked about this, that the frame keeps changing, depending on what's happening. But the frame around which your play is in the middle of it, because the frame is, the whole culture and the whole history of what's going on right now. You can't help but be inside that frame. So in a way, you don't have to talk about it because everybody knows what it is. And then you can just, try to work within that, but it keeps shifting. So it is really interesting.
But I think, we've done in the past, we have done some very directly political works. We did this piece called Soft Targets. There was an organization, Performance for Nuclear Disarmament, a long time ago, which Mabou Mines, and we went on tour, and this was about this character, Helen Caldecott, who was a doctor who was a big anti-nuclear activist. And actually, Ellen's father, Ben Maddow, the screenwriter, wrote that play for us.
Oh. Yeah. Long time ago.
We did a piece called Marcellus Shale, which was about fracking, but it was really more about this community in upstate New York where we have a house, and just how it divided that community. So it's really about the people involved. But I think most of our work is not head-on political like that. Right now, actually, I'm sort of struggling with that idea because the piece of which we'll be doing at La Mama in the spring, there is a kind of in the background, what's going on in the world, and the question is how much, that becomes background, how much becomes foreground.
Right.
You don't want to just tell people what they already know, but it's really, how people are affected. And I think that thing that Ellen said about default utopias, that's one kind of present. Oh well, it could be like this, we were just watching Y Tu Mama Tambien, and I was thinking about that as a kind of example of that, because it's really just about, this road trip with these young men and this older woman, and just about, this incredible life and stuff, but there's just these little flashes of you see on the roadside, these soldiers arresting people or doing checks on them, or you hear little things about how somebody lost their job because of a hotel was built where their house was. But it's just like a little flash, that frames, this is what the road trip is going through,
Right.
And I thought that was a very strong way of dealing with politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to shift to institutions now, and really, artists with institutions. How have institutions supported or not supported your work over the years?
Well, I mean, there's certain institutions, like downtown institutions, like here, La Mama, that
gave us venues to perform in. And there's less and less of them now, but we're still considered to be a resident company of La Mama, which means that we perform there every other year, probably.
I mean, I think there's a question of venues. Regional theaters have not done much to support our kind of work.
Yeah, we used to go on tour more, and now we don't.
Yeah, there's less support for that.
Yeah.
There's certainly
like at universities or something.
Very scant support from government institutions. Thank God for New York State Council of the Arts and Department of Cultural Affairs in the city. They keep going, but it's certainly not like some European countries where the institutions really support
Artists.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have recommendations for how institutions can support the kind of experimentation that you do in your work in the face of commodification? Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are some models. I mean, we've done a couple of residencies right now at the Mercury Store.
Oh, yeah, Mercury
and
Store.
Iguanas, which is really a great situation where it's just for early development works.
They pay everybody.
They
give you a week,
space.
To do whatever kind of experimenting you want.
Yeah, it's a magical residency. I had one earlier this spring.
Yeah, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of other places that are doing.
Somebody was talking about another one. I forgot the name.
Well, I just noticed in Red Hook with the Coffee Street Studio.
Coffee Street Studios. Yeah, it's a Java K. Chalfont and her partner. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now.
It sounds like they're trying to do something like
that.
They're
doing some residencies, and it's a great space.
Yeah, I've been in
Red
that
Hook.
space. We actually did a film there with Kim.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Kim Whitener, we're talking about.
Yeah.
My partner at here for over 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of model of, supporting the development of work, but I think, if the larger institutions were a little more daring and, to present work like ours. I mean, understand, years ago, actually when we did No Plays, No Poetry, Anne just became the artistic director of Trinity Rep. And she started off her season with No Plays, No Poetry. And then she had this very challenging season, and they lost a lot of their, subscribers. And then they got rid of her after a year.
Yeah.
So it was like there was a really bold person trying to do some bold stuff, and it just was not supported by the institution. And so it just really needs, people with guts and saying, well, look, this is also what the theater is, and we'll give you your Christmas Carol, but we'll also do this.
Yeah.
How has the downtown scene changed since you've begun?
Well, as we said, I think I said there's less venues than there were before, like the Ohio, which was always such a great place, moved and then disappeared.
Yeah.
And a lot of other venues too. I think that when we were younger, we could work part-time and still have enough time to do our theater work because rent was not so expensive. So now when you work with young people, they have like 10 jobs and they're, it's really, really hard because it's so expensive to live. So that makes it just more challenging.
Yeah, because we are always trying to work with young people in our shows, and we really have to accommodate that they have another job, 2 other jobs, and stuff like that, and working with them. It's tough. I think it's much tougher. You have to have a lot of grit to.
Yeah. Do you think the spirit of downtown still exists? It's certainly not geographically limited the way it once was. It's like all 5 boroughs.
Right.
But
definitely there's a lot in Brooklyn now. I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's a lot going on. I think there is, despite everything, a lot of really interesting work and people really trying. So I think in that sense the spirit continues. But I think too, because it is more spread out, I think there was more, there was this concentration in downtown Manhattan, which was a little bit different, with the Mabou Mines, Worcester Group, us, Manhattan Project. There was a kind of little core.
Place feels important in your work. Is New York City one of your collaborators?
I think so, yeah.
Definitely.
I definitely thought in Triplicity, as you said, it's 3 New Yorkers that normally wouldn't run into each other, but there's a way that they do run into each other that was really beautiful.
Right, that was the idea. Our exposure as urban livers to all different kinds of people, and you just see so much in the street when you go out of people who think differently than you and look different than you and have different realities than you. And even like when we do mediation, like in small claims court, there's like a whole economy underneath the economy. There's all kinds of ways of living here. And I think that does inform our work a lot. It's very...
Yeah. And, one of the pieces Ellen wrote really came out of a housing court case, about the kind of that relationship between landlords and tenants and stuff like that. So I think that definitely feeds our work. But I think it's also, because New York is so diverse, I think it's important to keep that in the work as well, especially when there's so much anti-diversity programs, and say, no, this is who we are, what you're talking about, and just to remind people of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely that's the frame, again, although we've written quite a few pieces that take place in the country because we have this place upstate, so that comes into it too, but it's also, the city is there as a kind of counter to the country.
How about passage of time? That also has been present in a number of your works.
Yeah. So, I think, since I was young, I've always, mortality's always been a big theme in my head, and not just because I'm old now, but I think, I remember, reading when I was young, I loved kind of those long novels that took, like Dr. Zhivago or something, which took place over a long span of time. You saw the people grow old in it, and I always found that very moving. So a number of the shows we've done have to do with, we did a show called Imminence, which was really setting human time against geological time. And actually the whole stage was splitting as if like these tectonic plates were parting during the whole course of the show. Something about that, just feeling a kind of that, I guess, the smallness of the scale of our life compared to the hugeness of the life of the universe is one thing that's always, I know, not impressed me, but sat on me in a way. Then one of the shows we did was called The Room Sings, which was actually about our country house, which had a history of like, we kept hearing these stories of the many generations of people who lived in this house. It's from the 19, it's over more 100 years old and all kinds of. So it was kind of like the story of these generations as told by the house. And I think part of that was influenced by Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, where there's a beautiful section which is just about how this empty house is changing in the season when nobody's there and decaying, and just, a kind of gorgeous passage of time in this house. So actually Ellen played the room.
I played the room.
in that thing. And this latest piece which I'm doing now called The Door Slams, the Glass Trembles, it's sort of inspired by Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain. Not so much the story, but the way he deals with time, because it takes place in a sanatorium. I know the stretch of 7 years that this takes, the way time contracts and expands and distorts. And what's remarkable about the book is the way he makes the reader feel the way time is changing, the way the characters are experiencing the way time is changing, how the reader can experience that too. So
that's what we're trying for.
The challenge is how to make the audience experience that kind of malleability of time. And I think the other thing about time is that it's very connected with music.
Music, yeah.
Which is very important in our work, because of course music has time signatures. It has
affects the way
shifts.
Yeah, it affects the way you look at things. When you hear something and it changes.
Plug it, stuff it, plug it, stuff it, chop, 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 chop. More sticks, more mud.
And as a director, that one of the things you have whatever, your hour and a half or so, you're in control of the time as a director, and how you make that time move for the audience is crucial. So sort of always aware of that. And I think another element that's kind of important, and particularly because of Ellen's music, but like was clear in Triplicity, but it's also in other works, is the way repetition makes you aware of time. And I think repetition is like a very powerful tool, especially when something repeats, but when it repeats in a different form or a different context. So you're hearing the same phrase, you're seeing the same gesture, but it's now in a different context. So you see it differently.
In the church, I worship the small. She worships the small. I worship. She worships the small.
Beckett said, habit is a great deadener, so time can be just a repetition without change can be like deadening, but repetition with variation is really interesting.
I want to harken back to something you talked about a minute ago. You were talking about mortality and aging, and how are you thinking about our culture, which so much celebrates the young, as your elder artists? How are you thinking about that in your art making?
Well, I feel like actually in the last couple of years I've gotten more attention than because of being old. In a weird way. You would think it would be the opposite, but we've gotten Lifetime, Obie Awards. I just got this Tooth of Time Award, which is for a distinguished career, and then because we had our 50th anniversary, that became like a kind of an interesting thing. Oh, they lasted 50 years doing this, and so let's go see. So I feel like And, people ask me to be in more readings because they need an old lady, and there aren't so many, maybe. Even though I know that one of the things that happens when you get older, and I definitely feel this, is you become invisible, which is in some ways a relief, but also can be very, strange and make you feel like you're not there for a lot of people.
I'm curious if you feel that too, because I've heard a lot of older women say they become invisible, and I'm curious if you feel that way as a man.
I don't know that because I don't know, I don't know if I'm aware of myself as so visible before, so I don't know if that's a...
Well, maybe that's because women are, maybe there is, when you're younger, people are like, bothering you or looking at you. There's a lot of people looking at you when you're young, in the street, let's say, or even at a party or something that you have to navigate when you're a young woman, and then it goes away. But maybe men don't have that so much. I don't know
if it's true of all men, but yeah, I think so. But I think in terms, I think it's true that, people are looking for the new thing. You're more likely to be covered. Sometimes, if it's younger, the newer. But I don't think there's a conflict, between. I don't feel like in competition with young people in any way. I feel I'm very excited to be around and working with young people.
How do you define success now, and has that changed from the way you thought of success 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago?
I don't know what it is anymore. I feel like if you get to do what you want to do and people relate to it and come up to you afterwards and say, oh yeah, that was great, I really understood something, or it changed the way I looked at things, or that's really great. And even though maybe when I was younger, I wanted so many people to see me, my work, and that hasn't, I haven't become famous, right, except in a small world. And I don't know, so maybe that used to be, and you don't get reviewed anymore or something so much. I still feel like I'm learning that that's not so important.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I think when I was younger, I sort of had the idea, it would be great to direct an opera at the Met or something, something really large like that. But now I'm just really happy to be able to continue doing work and creating work, and that there is a group of people who really, respond to it and seem to be grateful for it. So that's success.
Yeah, that's getting into legacy now. So are there other things that you think about related to legacy and what you offer to artists that are coming up? Or
some people have a couple of times in the last, we went to a class of our friend Alvin Eng. They were really young, and they had come to see Triplicity, and they were really interested in how long, and they were interested in us as people who had managed to do this for our whole lives, and as a kind of model, of and then there was a person in our workshop in the Mercury store last week, who was also a younger person. She's like, I'm so glad I met you because, my partner and I have been working on stuff. We've been working together for 10 years, but it's possible to go through your life and still be doing it and have children and, and not give up all that other stuff and still manage to do theater for a long time. And they seem, inspired by that. Mm-hmm. The longevity and the fact that we keep being creative even when we're older.
Yeah.
Like she said, I have a grandmother. She's your age. She doesn't even know who I am. And here you are, and you're doing this kind of thing. So I'm like, oh God, but still, yeah.
I think, theater is ephemeral, and it's there in the moment, which is one of the things that's both really attractive about it and really sad about it as well. So who knows, whether any of the work will last. We have our archive at NYU Bob's Library and stuff, but who will look at that, I don't know. I think the legacy is just really in people who've seen the work, and hopefully young people will sort of been inspired by that and carry on.
Yeah.
Well, you all have lived a very productive artistic life. What do you think is possible today for artists to try to live a truly sustainable life? What do we need in our field to support artists to create in the way that you've been able to create for these 50 years?
Well, it would be nice if there was more support
Yeah.
from the government or somebody, for it to be taken seriously as an important part of culture, because it is. It should be supported. And so it's like, in spite of everything, you manage it. But it would be nice if it was a little bit like, oh, this is important.
Right.
Not just what kind of sneakers, but, this other
Yeah,
kind
I
of.
mean, I don't think it's, just about artists, like if Mandami really can get housing to be cheaper, that's going to be really great
Right.
for artists, Definitely if both the government institutions and private institutions would really step more and just, give people spaces to work, money to work. That's.
And also, I think there's also a thing of like if people are educated to think that the arts are, I think that is true of our identities, is that our parents really brought us up to think that art was important, reading was important, that all those kinds of things are really important to us and feel like right in the center of our lives. Mm-hmm. It has something to do with our education.
Yeah, so I think, arts and education programs too. It's kind of
so people want to
teaching really young people that this is something that's worthwhile and fun.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Really,
Welcome.
really appreciate it. It's
very
really
good that you're doing
fascinating.
something for the legacy of things. That's clearly something you're thinking about. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks to HowlRound for hosting us, and please tune into the next Torches.